I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Sky News witnessed the destruction inflicted on Iran's notorious Evin prison, which was sustained during the conflict with Israel. Hamas has tonight said it views the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal positively, but that more talks are needed on how to implement it. And Oasis have played the first show of their reunion tour, taking to the stage in Cardiff tonight. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, after a difficult week, professionally and personally, the Express says that Chancellor Rachel Reeves is now hinting at the necessity for her to raise taxes again. Same lead story on the front of Zoe's paper, The Guardian, which also says that she never at any time this week thought of quitting the job. The Times says she's told the Cabinet that the new rises could be even more unpopular than the ones introduced last autumn. The Eye hears that Labour MPs could rebel again if the Prime Minister U-turns again, this time on lifting the two-child benefit cap, a promise the Treasury no longer believes he can afford to keep. The Mail piles in with an attack on Labour's year in power from Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch. The Telegraph has advice to the Tories from former PM Boris Johnson: ignore Nigel Farage and Reform UK. The FT understands that a consulting group credited with helping to set up the Gaza humanitarian aid programme, backed by the US and Israel, has drawn up plans to move Palestinians out of Gaza. And then we come to a string of papers leading with the big Oasis concert tonight, their comeback concert, Mad for 'em, that's the Mirror. Come Back Our Kids, that's the Star. And Stand By Me, that's the front of the Sun. So welcome once again to Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Let's start with the Mail. Front page, year of lies and failure. That's Kemi Badenoch's assessment of the Labour government's 12 months in power.
I mean, whatever you think of Kemi Badenoch, and I'm not a fan, I really do feel for her because her attack lines are extremely difficult to pull off. You know, if she can say he's done nothing in 12 months and look what a disaster everything is, and then people just turn around and say you were in power for 14 years and look what a disaster you left. And if anything, the harder she goes on Keir Starmer, the more she kind of lets him off the hook because she reminds everybody the context that he came into power. Whereas if you look at him, like as the Mirror have today, if you look at it as a series of failures and successes, it's not looking great. Whereas if you look at it as, you know, a complete economic meltdown, then you do tend towards a longer view, which is this economic meltdown was not created in the past 12 months. That's what I think, anyway. I don't know whether...
Well, Kemi Badenoch saying that they've taken a wrecking ball to the economy.
I mean, the economy is not in a great state right now, but actually it's not really been in a great state since 2008, if we're being completely honest. It's been a very sort of slow motion, painful experience with the occasional real dip and dive in between there. Nobody actually is looking at this government and thinking, oh, aren't they doing a good job on the economy? But of course it is underpinned by that fact that everybody then goes, but we have just come off the back of a different government that has left them in a very difficult situation. The great spectre in all of this, it doesn't matter if you're Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch, is Nigel Farage, which is that both of these parties are sort of sitting there struggling, not doing very well in the polls. You know, Kemi Badenoch cannot shift her polling upward for love nor money. You know, Labour are doing dreadfully. Farage just has to sit there and wait, basically, and his polling and his ratings keeps going up. He doesn't have to come up with viable policies. He just has to continue to be the none-of-the-above candidate, and people just continue to get more and more fed up. But
this really enrages the kind of political commentariat that Farage gets so much success by not saying anything. And he's, you know, what do they call it? The Texas shooting game, where you just have to shoot and shoot and shoot and draw a ring round it. You don't actually have to aim at anything. The truth of it is, Farage is a symptom, not a cause of this malaise. Labour came in making a series of promises about people's lives feeling better, both more prosperous and more just, and public services feeling better, and, you know, public sector pay improving, and everybody's living standards going up. And if you're not going to deliver on those promises, then it doesn't matter whether you're Boris Johnson promising made-up levelling up or Keir Starmer promising very slow incremental change, which still isn't happening.
But is it accurate to go as far as accusing Keir Starmer of lying? Out and out lying.
I mean, I wouldn't say he... I mean, certainly he has lied. You know, the offer he made to the Labour members when he became leader was that he was just Jeremy Corbyn in a tie. And he's not been anything like as left-wing as he said he was going to be when he was tilting for leadership. So I wouldn't call him the most honest a politician has ever been, but whether or not he's actually lied about his promises for the country or simply serially disappointed everyone, I think is probably overstatement on Badenoch's part.
Yeah, I think lying... A U-turn is a form of dishonesty. Whether or not you want to call it a lie or not, it betrays that actually your principles weren't quite there to begin with if you're prepared to sort of volte-face for practical reasons.
Why is it dishonesty and not a change of mind?
Because you say you're going to do something and then you have a change of heart, not because you believe morally it's the right thing to do, because your backbenchers twist your arm or a market does it, then actually that shows that your principles aren't quite there. Say what you will about Liz Truss. At least she was honest and she stuck to her principles.
No, come on. I disagree with that.
I don't think it's unfair to say that he has been dishonest at all. I understand why he has been, because he has inherited a very difficult situation, and it turns out he does not have the full control over his party that perhaps he was under the impression that he had. Sure. But that doesn't mean, actually, that what he is currently offering is what he was offering 12 months ago at the election, or, as Zoe says, what he initially offered his party when he stood to be leader. Now, politics involves a bit of a dance. Everybody understands that. But that doesn't mean that you then sit there and go, oh, well, of course, he's been completely honest.
The other thing is, you know, listening to you frame it that way, the cuts to disability allowance, they were nothing to do with principle. There's nobody, I can't even think of a Conservative who would say, on a matter of principle, I want to take this money off the people who are already the poorest in society. That's not a values stance. The stance is basically anything to get us out of the public finance hole, which doesn't involve taxing the rich, taxing wealth, or taxing corporations more. And that is the, you know, that's hence this
leads us on to your paper, the Guardian, with the Chancellor saying that she's not going to rule out tax rises.
Except, of course, when you frame it in that way, and it's because, well, we're going to tax the rich and that's what we have to do, we're already finding that incredibly difficult to do. Any number of governments have tried to find ways of extracting more money out of people. It's very difficult, especially when you sort of set yourself, as Britain has. Britain is a massively over-financialised country, relying massively on financial services, not just domestic, not just European, internationally. It means that you bring in a lot of money from abroad, but that money can also disappear very quickly. It's not a very firm tax base, if you will, to sort of decide to draw upon. And that, I'm afraid, is a problem. And this idea, therefore, that there is this magic pot of cash that you can tax at some point, it evaporates very quickly the second that those people decide to move. Lots of them have already moved. This is not, you know, this is not sort of a fantasy. We have seen lots of people leaving the country, moving their assets offshore because they fear that these taxes are going to come in. So who then ends up being taxed? It's people on the middle rungs and the lower rungs who are already massively being taxed. And that, again, is a problem then for the Labour Party, because they came in saying that things are going to get easier, and people say, my services aren't improving, but my tax bill is going up, and I feel the pain.
It's fascinating to me, because over the course of my career, I've seen the argument that there's no way to tax wealth become an absolute norm in political commentary. An absolute norm, you know, it never works. Look what happened to Luxembourg. Look what happened to Switzerland. Look what happened when the rich people left this place or that place. It never works. It never works. Of course it works. Of course it works taxing rich people. If you haven't found a way to make it work, you just haven't thought about it. If people leave to go to another country, then you need to do it internationally. Of course it works. It's worked. It worked in the 60s. Now...
So what happens when one country scabs on the rest and goes, well, we won't tax them, and they all go to that country?
Then you cross that bridge when you come to it. But then,
so there's the problem, basically.
No, but what's interesting to me is that there's a complete air of defeatism about taxing the rich, within which the rich just get richer and richer and richer and richer. And we look at that as though it's a law of the physical universe. It simply isn't. It has been in centuries gone by, but it's not a law of physics. It's a law of economics, and therefore can be changed. Anyway, that seems to be what...
So how would you do it?
What Rachel... Well,
if it's so straightforward, how would you do it?
Well, I would start with international agreements. I mean, you know, you could do this.
And how would you get all of those countries to agree to it?
It's
There's so many poor countries that would go, we'd happily take these people and not tax them.
It's actually really... There is an amazing movement for international tax agreements. They just need to be given their head. I mean, people need to stop resigning themselves to this negative...
I can see one major problem.
Domestically, the Chancellor is saying...
Are you reminding us that neither of us is in government?
Rather than this hypothetical global order that we're trying to set up.
Let's bring it back to where we are. The Chancellor's saying that she's not going to rule out tax rises. That is her
Sounds
being
like
honest.
they're going up,
So Rachel,
yeah.
but she's not talking about wealth taxes. She's talking about what Benedict was saying, which I also disagree with. You can't just keep taxing people who don't have that much more and more and more, so you divide an ever-dwindling pot between resentful people. You just can't do it. And so I feel for her. She didn't want to do this. She didn't want to have any tax rises at all. But if she was going to come out and say, I might have to do tax rises, it would be much better for her to say it was going to be on a wealth tax. But for some reason, that's become politically unsayable.
Problems all round for the Labour administration. The eye pointing to the fact that they simply can't afford another U-turn.
No, they can't. I mean, but we're in a slightly strange position now where I think it's fair to say that a lot of Keir Starmer's sort of political goodwill is shot with his own party. I'm not necessarily saying with the public. We're a very long way away from a general election being a possibility. But actually, what has transpired in the last couple of weeks, you can tell that there is an awful lot of bad feeling on the backbenches. And, you know, we're still hearing these complaints about Keir Starmer not knowing people's names, that sort of thing. This stuff does matter. And, of course, many Labour MPs pointing out, actually, the massive ways in which their constituents rely on things like benefits and the way that these moves could have massively hampered not only people's quality of life, which is, of course, what most Labour MPs go into politics for, but also their majorities come the next general election, that this is a serious problem for them. This, you know, rowing back on personal independence payments, just like we had the U-turn on winter fuel allowance, all this shows, a year in, that he, personally, Keir Starmer, is very weak. He is susceptible to these sorts of rebellions. And therefore, I think that there is going to be a lot more backbench power coming in. Now, the Labour Party doesn't really tend to do backstabbings. They're not the Tories. They don't go in for quite the same level of childishness when it comes to upheaval. But that doesn't mean that he is in charge of his party necessarily. And I think it's going to be a really difficult couple of years for him. He could conceivably last the full hog because he has this huge majority. But I don't think necessarily that this is going to be an administration of his own design, if I can put it that way.
I don't know if he is going to last the whole hog. And what's interesting is, you remember a year ago, everybody called it the loveless landslide. I think there's a certain amount of lovelessness within the party as well, which I didn't realise before. I kind of thought because of the new intake, a lot of them were inexperienced. I thought maybe there was a bit of hero worship. I thought there was something of the kind of early Blair years, if not to the kind of voting public, then certainly within the PLP. But the size of that rebellion and the fact that even now they've won, that's just encouraged them. To suggest to me that maybe there is like a very serious disgruntlement within the party that's not going anywhere.
Would you say he doesn't have control?
I would say that it wouldn't take much for him to lose control completely.
OK. Zoe and Benedict for the moment, thank you. We're going to take a break. Coming up, what's the story, morning papers? Apparently, it's Oasis. That and more appalling puns when we come back.
mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from the UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone should say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Let's take a look at the Telegraph front page and this story with a blast from the past. Boris Johnson, he's had some advice, and that is that Nigel Farage should be ignored.
Yes,
Benedict.
this is, so he's been speaking to a Swiss magazine called Weltwoche. I am assuming that's what it's called, where he said that his strategy of just pretending that Nigel Farage isn't there kept him at 0 in the polls. I'm reminded of a monster in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy called the ravenous bug-bladder beast of Troll, which had a flaw, it had a weakness, which was that if you covered your eyes and you couldn't see it, it assumed it couldn't see you. And this is sort of what it feels like, the slightly sort of nonsensical thing of looking at somebody who is at 33 or something % in the polls and just going, if you just ignore it and pretend that it's not there, it can't possibly harm you. That's sort of the feeling that I'm getting from it. It's so far gone as a concept for Boris Johnson, the man who has landed the Conservatives in such a wonderful position, to turn around and go, this existential threat, oh, it's not there. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. I mean...
I like your impression.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite. I've been really sad. I've not been able to get it out more often in the last 2 years.
I mean, it's typically a-factual of Boris Johnson, because what he said to this Swiss journalist was, this party was on, the party which you mentioned was on 0% when I was in power. And that's because reform didn't exist when he was in power. And the Brexit Party was actually on 19%, which wasn't zero. And it wasn't a million miles from 26%, which is what reform's on now. So, you know, it's not actually true. Boris Johnson did a huge amount to take the wind out of the Brexit Party's sails, not least persuading them to not actually stand in that election and then giving half of them a peerage. He doesn't ignore things. He just says it, but he does have a point, which is that I don't know if you remember that speech that Keir Starmer gave a couple of weeks ago where somebody montaged it. He talked about Nigel Farage constantly. Nobody had asked him. Nobody asked him to.
Yes.
Nobody wanted to know. And he just, like, he went in as though the guy was living rent-free in his head, which he was. And that's all we talked about. So it does make sense not to let that man's name pass your lips if you are his opponent, but...
Sort of difficult, though, at this stage. I mean, I don't think either of these approaches are good. The only thing
what
that you can...
do?
The thing is, I would wait until we get closer to a general election. I mean, that doesn't sound like a great thing, but the key strength of Farage and Reform is that they can be anything they want to be and nothing at the same time. When you get to a general election, you have to start coming up with policies. I suspect a lot of people who are currently going, yeah, I'll vote for Reform, will start going, hang on, this isn't really me. Because it does take people from the left and the right who are disgruntled. If it comes down very firmly on one side or another, it'll alienate a lot of voters. And if it sticks to the centre, a lot of people will go, I don't want another centrist party.
Well, that is part of the advice that Boris Johnson didn't give. I mean, he's saying that advice on how to tackle the threat from reform, claiming that the best thing was for political rivals to offer their own policies and not to talk about Mr Farage. So come up with your own policies.
Basically.
Well, but, I mean, I think the thing is, voting is an emotional business, and it's more and more emotional as we go into the 2020s. And people don't vote for a shopping list of policies they like or quite like anymore, partly because of the damage Boris Johnson did to the political promise. You know, many of the promises he made in the manifesto that he stood on, what you couldn't even put your finger on what they meant. All the ones you could put your finger on, he didn't fulfil. And there
so
has
are people voting for personalities?
People are voting for personalities, but they're also voting on their emotions. And I think, you know, in mountaineering, they say, don't let yourself get too cold, because once you're cold, it's really hard to heat up. I think you shouldn't let an electorate get too angry, because once they're angry, it's really hard to de-anger them. And I don't think there's a policy on earth that could make people who've been let down by 5 successive prime ministers now get de-angried. So they're looking for this. They're looking for this figure who says, I feel your rage and can do something with it. They don't care what his policy is on stamp duty.
I mean, the thing is, Boris Johnson was a vast character, though. It was as much about the personality as that people actually thought, I want to believe that the character will give me these things, whereas Farage is the character without any of the promises. So maybe we've just completely inversed it and gone, well, OK, we'll take the character, but we won't take any promises and we'll see what happens when we get there. It's not a great place.
Talking of comeback kids, Boris Johnson was one. We're going to talk about Oasis now.
You want to talk about Oasis?
The headline on the Daily Star. No, not Corbyn. Oasis.
Well,
yes.
What do we think?
What do we think? Sadly, neither of us were there.
Well, I was never an Oasis person. I was a Blur person.
Oh,
I don't.
On the other side.
You two are probably too young to remember the famous.
What? You're talking to me.
I'm going to take that, actually. Yeah, why not? I have no idea who these people are. No concept of them at all. But I mean, I didn't have a couple of grand either to spend on going to one of these concerts. I mean, it sounds like it's been great if you got to go, so good for you if you did. But
I will say it does sound very brief. They weren't on stage for very long.
Well, how long were they on stage?
I mean, it was over by 10. Yeah, over by 10 o'clock. So maybe they have to manage their minutes in case they're exposed to each other for too long. The Gallagher brothers. I mean, they're contractually obliged to only be within 30 metres from
Well, they'll breach their restraining order if they're on for longer
maybe
than
that's
2
what
hours.
it is. Yeah.
But I was at Glastonbury, and you get really used to 45-minute sets there. And now I think a 2.5-hour set would be too much for me.
Oh, really?
Because 45 minutes is perfect.
How long did the Prodigy play for at Glastonbury?
45 minutes. Everybody plays for 45 minutes. Yeah.
I've seen the Prodigy for 3 hours before.
Oh my gosh, really?
See, I'm not that young.
Thank you both for taking us through the papers. We want to bring some breaking news now to you. That is that at least 13 people are reported to have been killed in the US state of Texas after heavy rain caused flash flooding. Officials also say 23 children are missing from a girls' camp in the state. The children were amongst more than 700 youngsters who were at a summer camp when floodwaters swept through at around 4 a.m. local time. As much as 10 inches of heavy rain fell in just a few hours overnight in central Kerr County, causing flash flooding. An official in the city of Kerrville told reporters the flooding struck before dawn over a very short period of time that could not be predicted, even with the radar. Emergency services are continuing a frantic search in fast-moving water to find those missing. More on that in just a moment.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.